Podge, fucking hell.
Yo, we're back.
I have a problem, okay? When I'm recording solos, I tend to go into my little studio, close the door, turn on the heater, have everything set up, and I start writing a few notes before I go into what it is that I'm going to talk about.
Yeah.
And what often happens is 45 minutes go by, I've 15 pages of notes, and I haven't hit record. And we've had the same problem in here. It's just that it's the pairing. So just to bring the listener along for the ride, in between these conversations that we're having, there's maybe 2 or 3 minutes of me exporting the file and getting it ready for upload and all the rest of it. And we're chatting away. And Podge will say something interesting, and then that'll spark an idea in my mind, and I'll start talking about something interesting. And then that'll spark something in his mind, and then he starts talking. And then we realise we've been in the fucking van for 15 minutes having this wonderfully fucking enlightening conversation, and we never hit fucking record. So I just had to just stop us and hit fucking record there. One of the many things that came up in the interval was green. What was the Evergreen?
Oh yes.
So can you just flesh that out, or just repeat what you were saying to me there a minute ago about Evergreen?
The idea of continuing on with your idea of being able to address maybe more ground level ideas, or kind of what you call it, bedrock philosophy. So we're talking more deeply, maybe more broadly about topics rather than getting into specifics about current situations or that. So the idea being that you could listen to this podcast and years from now and it's still current, because we're not talking specifically about COVID or lockdowns, but we're talking more about mentalities and ideas.
Exactly. I think at the start of episode 1 of this podcast series, we wanted to talk about, or there was a part of us that wanted to talk about COVID and in particular the vaccines, but instead of talking about COVID and vaccines, which is a very 2021 topic, we discussed where you get your information from, and that's essentially the same thing. It's the foundational aspect of it. So it is what you end up generating is something that's kind of timeless or evergreen, as you put.
Yeah. It's actually Rogan describing Dan Carlin's podcast, described them as Evergreen podcasts. I thought it was a really nice expression. So yeah, the idea that they're always valuable, or they're always, doesn't matter when you tune into them, they're always blooming. I suppose there's something to enjoy at any stage.
Yeah, there's something. Again, I've kind of preached about this a little in the solos and the conversations that I've had with people. I try not to get into too much detail about anything in specific. I always try and view things as broadly as I can, I think. Because when you go into the detail, again, to add in an analogy I used before, again, I can't remember the fucking context, but the sentiment will certainly be there. We have a tendency to look too much at the detail and not see the broader picture. So in relation to COVID, what I find is people who are quote unquote following COVID, people who are really, hanging on the news every hour of every day, and they're into it, and they consider themselves very informed.
Yes.
And they know the daily counts of the cases and the deaths and blah 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 blah. But they couldn't tell you, so they might be able to tell you what the deaths or the numbers were today and yesterday and the day before, but they can't tell me what the numbers were in the first quarter of last year, or the second quarter, or the third or fourth quarter. But having those 4 numbers, the amount of cases in the first, second, third and fourth quarter, is far more valuable to you than knowing them on the daily basis.
The specific current nature of things.
Exactly. And the other one, the analogy that I meant to mention there was, I remember hearing it said that when treating cancer, we look at the cellular level. When trying to cure cancer, we're looking at the cellular level. But that's akin to trying to cure a traffic jam by looking at the pistons in an internal combustion engine. You're too fucking close. Do you know that kind of way? And if you can just zoom back out, and what you're saying is kind of zoom back out and underneath. Like you're getting you said, what was it, bedrock? The bedrock of the philosophy. That's fucking savage. What's the fucking bedrock of it? Because we'll drive each other insane talking about the minutiae of detail here, there, and everywhere.
Yeah.
But it's the bedrock, because the problems that we have now on a societal level are the same problems that we had 100 years ago, 5,000 years ago.
Oh,
Like,
for sure.
the bedrock is still the same.
Yeah, human nature goes. Starve someone for a few weeks, and we'll see just how primitive we are. Like, take away people's running water and electricity, the things we kind of take for granted, and you see how things will devolve pretty damn quickly. Like, it's
No, absolutely. I mean, are you a violent person? No, not particularly. But what if there's 15 litres of fresh water available, and one family wants a higher percentage of that water than your family is going to get? Violence all of a sudden is a necessary, not even a necessary evil, but it's just necessary
full stop
for just fairness and for survival. It's funny that, we lose sight of how as we've become more advanced, we've become less primitive. There's something to that. As we've become more advanced, we've become less primitive, but we're still primitive. I don't know, this we like to think of ourselves as being modern people and not as kind of naive or as stupid, or we're better informed than people of the past. But fuck, are we like?
Just a veneer over the ape instinct, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and I think again, broad sweeping generalization alert, but do the left wingers have a thicker veneer or a better veneer, and the right wingers don't like a veneer? I don't know. It's a weird one, because you need some sort, what am I trying to say? The veneer that you pull over yourself, like that's society. You need it, do you know that kind of way?
Yeah,
you need to fucking leave the trees, do you know that kind of way?
Constrain yourselves in a lot of ways.
I'm sorry.
Constrain yourself, I suppose. It's like we were saying in interval again. When you constrain yourself, you're forced to be a bit more creative, I suppose, in ways. And where was I going with that? So yeah, by putting on a veneer and kind of maybe constraining yourself in certain ways, you're actually more free to do certain things.
Yeah, I think the way it came up with us there was the constraint on this format. So we're limiting ourselves with time, and the original idea was that we'd pick a topic and we just talk about it for 20 minutes. But that fell flat in its face 15 seconds into the first episode. But we kept the constraint on the time thing, which is kind of good, because from a listener's point of view, 10 20-minute episodes is a lot easier to wrap your head around than one 200-minute episode.
Yeah, for sure.
And even for us, it's different, but constraints can often lead to just more fruitfulness generally. If you're limited to doing things a certain way, you have to be a little bit more creative, because if the world is your oyster, what do you do with that? Do you know, kind of way? If you can do everything,
you don't do anything.
You don't do anything. And I think there's something to that too. It's almost as if we're overburdened with opportunity. Do you know that kind of way? It's like not analysis paralysis. There's something else where there's a paralytic aspect of choice.
Option paralysis.
That's what it is. Yeah, absolutely. So the more you have available to you, the harder it is to decide what it is that you want to do. So back in the day, when you were a teenager and you were being asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? I don't know if that was the question, what do you want to be? The question might have been back in the day, what do you think you can be? Because now you're brought up to think that you can do anything. And that's great. But there's an element of something untruthful there, because not everybody can do everything.
No, we're not all born equal. That's
not by any stretch of the imagination. But that doesn't mean that everybody shouldn't be treated equally.
Equal opportunities, say, rather than equal outcomes. Yeah,
well, it's funny, because I don't know if we mentioned this in a previous podcast or if it was in the interval, but this idea of a level playing field. So fines are the one that springs to mind. So if you're if you break a certain law, let's say there's a fine imposed on you. Let's say it's littering. There's a €200 fine for fucking littering, okay? And that's done in an effort to be fair. But people don't have the same amount of money. So if I'm a multi-millionaire...
Oh, you just pay the...
Yeah, there's
a charge.
Fine.
Like, it's not a fine.
There's no penalty. You just pay the fine. But to somebody who's fucking, doesn't have 200 quid to pay the fucking fine, it's different.
Yeah, you could be sent to... You don't pay that fine, you go to prison.
Well, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But it's funny that, though, because... That's obviously just a small example of that, but you could extrapolate that for fucking God knows what. Like, what specifically, I don't know. I'm going to have to fucking think about it. But, you impose fines in an effort to be fair. But because people have different amounts of money, you're
it's
not
the
fair.
same fairness.
But what do you do then? Is a fine a percentage of your fucking income?
Yeah, I like that.
But it's funny though, isn't it? Like, I mean, but you think that we'd have gotten to the bottom of this after so many thousands of years of civilization, like, do you know that kind of way?
Yeah.
But then again, it's only very recently that we've been able to, let's say, share this conversation, or I could just as easily be having this conversation with somebody in New Zealand right now. Do you know that kind of way? That's a new thing.
Yeah, or you could be having that with a conversation with someone in New Zealand without even knowing you're talking to someone in New Zealand. Like, it's someone in New Zealand could be tuned into this now, like, and you're completely unaware. It's
no, absolutely.
Especially as you're saying, you're aiming for Evergreen podcast, so it could be someone listening to this in New Zealand 10 years in the future.
Yes,
and still someone getting value from it.
Yeah, speaking to somebody. Not only can we speak to somebody on the other side of the world, but we can speak to somebody on the other side of the world in the future.
Yeah, it's bizarre.
How insane is that though when you think about it? Fucking deadly. But again, the beauty of what we're doing here is, and I've said it before, that I think everybody should have their own podcast. I think people should have podcasts like they have Facebook pages. Now, it doesn't necessarily need to be for publication either, but it's just an excuse, because outside of me having created this platform, there's no fucking way I'd be chatting to you here now. No fucking way, like, or any of the people that I've had on. And there's no way that I would have spent the amount of time that I have done getting me thoughts clearer if it wasn't for a kind of an end result, which is kind of shameful in a way. We should be all working on ourselves like that to a large degree anyway, with or without a podcast. But you need vehicles to facilitate your movement.
Yeah, definitely,
do you know what I mean?
Definitely. Yeah, it's like we were saying earlier about having a reality to test your hypothesis on. Otherwise, you could just be speculating forever without actually any real end results or any real interchange. Like, we were so, I don't know, I know myself, and can so easily deceive myself that, you know, it's very easy to trick myself into thinking that I'm making progress in something, or I'm getting somewhere without having actually tested, am I getting somewhere? So it's good to have a format like this, or anything to actually look back on and go recollect, am I actually making progress or headway, or am I just kind of fucking telling myself I am?
Yeah, massaging your own ego.
Yeah.
But it's funny though as well, because sometimes you might have an idea in your head or a thought in your head, and then you say it out loud to a group of people, and you're like, oh fuck.
Shit.
And it might be something that you've had in your head for years, and it could be a pretty fundamental part of you. Like, that's the other thing I'd like to have a chat with you about. Like, we are talking about like evergreen conversations, say, things that will stand the test of time, and what they are is they're fundamentally deeper. Okay. I suppose what I'm struggling to say is there seems to be an appetite for people to discuss minutiae. So we're cutting live to Grania in Wicklow, who's there at the scene. This is unfolding now. Grania, tell us the details. And it's all very present. It's all very in the moment. It's all very now. But I think there's a bigger appetite, and I think it's something that I'm tapping into here in some sense, of the more foundational things. So I have they're your presuppositions. So we're often questioning the tip of our iceberg thought, but it's rare that we start questioning the roots of it. Yeah, the bigger part that gives the underwater part that gives the top of it its stability.
Yeah,
do you know that kind of way? The fucking foundations, the guts of it. Because I have this thing in my head. I'm kind of opposed to banning things. It's just something that I believe in. I don't think things should be banned. Generally speaking,
do you think that's innate? Like, was that something you've always kind of had, or something you've developed? Do you reckon?
Probably a bit of both. I'm not entirely sure. I've never actually thought as to where that comes from. I think it was just born out in my experience of liking certain things that are illegal, like cannabis being one. Like, I'd be an advocate for the use of cannabis, basically, within reason. Again, I would view it as a tool. I mean, it's a great thing to build a house with. It's also a great thing to smash somebody across the face with. But you know, just because I'm pro hammer doesn't mean I'm pro assault.
Yes.
But I think we spend far too little time discussing amongst ourselves the foundational things, which are, you know, evergreen, as Rogan put it. You know, you can. There's something, and during the infill I gave you an example, and I'll just repeat it here now. There's a show called Yes Minister, and then there was a subsequent show called Yes Prime Minister. It was shot back in the fucking, I don't know, late 70s, early 80s, I think, and it was basically a British sitcom. And what I remember it as a kid, because my dad watched it, I hated it. It was a political fucking sitcom. I was like, ugh. As a 6-year-old, I was like, what? English people talking about politics. Why isn't fucking the Turtles on? You know? But I stumbled across a clip on YouTube, which was a clip of that show, and it was Brexit Explained. And I was like, oh, I'll give this a go. It was only 2 minutes. And they basically explained the European Union and how the Brits want it to fail because they want European countries to be at odds with each other all the time. And I'm not doing a very good job of explaining it, but they basically summarised Brexit perfectly 30 years before it ever happened. And a lot of the content was like that. It was timeless, and the reason that it was timeless was because I think there was a 13-week gap between when it was written and when people would see it, between finding the slot in the program, between actually recording it with the relatively primitive technology and processing it and all the rest of it. So because there was a 13-week gap, it couldn't be current. So they had to, by default, you mentioned this in the other podcast, this idea of restraining something, increasing the amount of creativity in it. So they had this 13-week lag restraint. So they had to go deep and they had to go fundamental, and essentially what they made was evergreen.
Yes.
Do you know that kind of way? And I just don't think we spend any time, never mind enough time, discussing the philosophical bedrock, as you put it, of our own thoughts, because if you get that straight,
everything else follows.
Everything else follows into place. So when somebody turns around to me and goes, "Oh, Frano, there's a new law." Okay, what's the law? Oh, they're banning fox hunting. What's your thoughts? Well, my knee jerk is always going to be, well, I'm opposed to banning things. So already you're halfway there. But then you have to kind of pull back and go, right, well, what is it specifically and why and all the rest of it. But you have a fundamental, I don't know, you have a position without having assumed your position. And there's a downside to that, because if your presupposition or your philosophical bedrock is that black people are inferior or that gay people are evil,
it can point in the wrong direction.
Certainly.
Certainly.
But just in keeping with that example, what we're having now is a discussion with, let's say, a racist person about immigration.
Yes.
Without having a discussion about their
racist beliefs or
the race. Yeah, it's like, where is your view on immigration coming from? Because you don't start with immigration. You start way deeper than immigration.
Definitely.
Way more fundamental.
I think there's maybe something that sprung to mind there is, I don't know, I've noticed that with maybe people who are kind of, I don't know, really aware of their own selves and kind of know themselves pretty well and know just self as a generalized way. They kind of know what it is to be a human. I find they're never as caught up in modern, current affairs. They're kind of more interested in, I don't know, to get religious, their eternal salvation. They're more interested in their own being and wellness and their own development on, is it raining in Cork, like, or fucking what's the new political trend or the new ideology of the day. They're kind of, I feel like they're more grounded in reality than, someone who's watching the news religiously.
Oh, very much so. Very much so.
Yeah, for me, I think that, again, I'm kind of on. I like thinking about these things, but I think, yeah, to understand the self that seems to be a lot of what gives me meaning in life. Anyway, that's the deepest question I can ask is, what am I? What am I doing here? Like, what are any of us doing here?
Yeah, because as far as I'm concerned, it's not until you have some idea, some grasp of what you are.
I can't understand anyone else.
How the fuck, like, if you can't understand yourself, you're not going to be able to understand yourself, but somehow you're going to be able to understand other people.
Yeah, and their motivations and their the weirder things like that, like why they do what they do, why they think what they think, which is kind of scary as well. And when you, I don't know, put that in the background of, people thinking that they know what's best for other people and kind of trying to, round off all the sharp edges in culture. And I don't know, it seems like the more we try to repress parts of ourselves, the more nasty, unexpected things happen. So, we're kind of, as just numerous examples of it, along we had fucking, like we were discussing earlier, it was gay, to be gay was illegal, like how many problems that caused, fucking, to have a child out of wedlock meant you were in a fucking mother and baby home. And the more, like you're saying, your knee jerk is to have an aversion to banning things, and I think that's a great knee jerk. It's certainly a better knee jerk than ban everything that you don't like. Fucking hell.
Podge, fuck, 22 minutes. The next one I'm going to pick up with, you mentioned it raining in fucking Wexford or something.
Cool,
I'm going to pick up from there.